We can't believe how fast this month has flown by. It is already time for another What We've Been Reading update.
So we read a lot of interesting books in November, had some surprises. So today we're going to update you on everything we read. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Our first book is Super Habits by Dr. Andrew Abela. This was our Catholic read-along book, the book of the month from Sophia Institute Press.
And at first glance, it is kind of hard to tell if this book is Catholic, but the author is a professor at the Catholic University of America, and these super habits are actually the virtues as defined by Thomas Aquinas.
So in the book, the author gives you a detailed explanation of each virtue, and then he gives you a real-life story to go along with that shows how you can incorporate the virtues into your own life. And some of the stories in here were really, really interesting. There was one about the island of Malta in World War II that we really liked.
And the book also comes with a little surprise feature, which is this massive chart that shows all of the different virtues and how they all interconnect.
Here you go, right here. It's all laid out for you, although just being honest here, I have to say we really didn't understand very well how this chart works, but that could be because we're not Thomas Aquinas scholars here.
We very well might just not have the background to understand and appreciate this.
So yeah, that definitely could be the case. The book itself is fairly easy to read, but again, just being honest, we have to say that towards the end, it did feel like all the virtues just kind of started to run together. However, I will always remember that the author said that sitting is the new smoking. We all need to get up and move around more.
So I think the bottom line here is that this book has a lot of good information in it. And if you're a Thomas Aquinas fan or a scholar, you will really appreciate it. But if not, you might not get the hype just as much.
However, you might read it and just love it, especially if you're in the business world, if you're a manager, because I think that this book was more geared towards you. So I don't feel like it was our favorite book from the book club this year so far, but we are so glad that we read it.
So our quick read book for the month was a new one from Matthew Kelly at Dynamic Catholic. And it is The Three Ordinary Voices of God, talking about how God speaks to us through our wants, needs, and desires.
This one was a little bit longer for a quick read. It was a little bit over 100 pages, but there were a couple of points in this one that really hit home for us.
For example, he talks about being a good listener and why most of us aren't great listeners and how we need to improve that. And he makes a really good case for why being a good listener is so important. So that was all well and good, but we have read quite a few Matthew Kelly books before, and so it felt like this book was fairly repetitive. Like he's written about everything in this book before.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, it never hurts to hear the information again. And if you're new to his books, this would be a really great one to start with. So I have to say that maybe it wasn't our all-time favorite Matthew Kelly book, but we still did take home a few good gems. My first book today is The Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain. I've been working on this one for a couple of months and finally finished it. It's the story of an extended trip that he took through Europe and the Holy Land and Egypt right after the Civil War. And this is the book that evidently catapulted him into great fame. And after reading it, I can definitely understand why. You know, he's pretty funny. He's a little bit irreverent. Sometimes he's even snarky. For example, all the tour guides that they had through different continents and countries, he called them all Ferguson because he said, you know what, I can't remember all these names. They just run together. Everybody is named Ferguson. So probably that's not very politically correct, but that's how he rolled. I was also surprised in this book that he is really anti-Catholic. I knew that going in. I knew that he wasn't a big fan of organized religion in general, and especially Catholics, but my goodness, you can definitely tell in this book, Catholics are not his favorite, although he does admit later on in the book that part of that is because he just grew up with a very anti-Catholic bias, handed down to him from his family. So he had to rethink that a little bit, though. In the end, when he gets to the desert monks in the Holy Land, they really rock his world. He can't believe how kind and loving and sincere and caring they are. Like anyone who comes to their monastery in the desert, no questions asked, they're just going to take care of you. So I think that must have stayed with him. He talks about how that made such a great impression on him. And then later on, he did go on to write his famous biography of Joan of Arc, which he always considered his masterpiece. So if you are looking for a fun travelogue to take you through the winter months, here you go. I got my Mark Twain fix for the year, and notwithstanding his anti-Catholic bias, I did enjoy this one.
All right, so for my reading last month, I had just started 2 different books, and throughout the month of November, I managed to finish one of them, and that one was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So I'm moving pretty slowly, but I am reading the books, and I did say I would review this one, so here we are. I'm following through on that. And so this book is a dystopian sci-fi. It was quite interesting, definitely not what I expected it to be. So this book follows Darrow. He works as a miner on Mars. And of course, as one does when you're a dystopian character, you're really suffering under the oppression of the government. And you also get the chance to move up in life and start to fight that government. And in his own way, that's exactly what Darrow does. So the first part of the book follows him on Mars and sort of his breakthrough. And then the second part of the book could only, in my mind, really be described as the Hunger Games on Mars. He goes to the Institute, and in the Institute, all of the students are put into houses. And then all the students are put into basically an arena, and they fight each other. So you have houses trying to take over each other, and you want to be the house that takes over all the other houses, and that's how you win. And winning comes with a lot of prestige and opportunities, apprenticeships, press, all those good things. So that was honestly the last thing I expected this book to be. I don't know what I thought it was, but it definitely wasn't that. And I also have a couple of bones to pick with this book, because it felt like Darrow and his house were just a bunch of like Mary Sues running around this arena winning everything. Like, you had some of them get sick and a couple of them die, but they were out there, they were winning all of their battles. And by the end of this book, there was no doubt in my mind that they were going to win. Like, they were so good at everything that I was just listening to it and I was like, yep, they're gonna win that battle. It's all gonna work out in the end. I don't have to worry about any of these characters. But then also weirdly, another thing that frustrated me was the chapter titles. You would have a chapter end where the characters are saying, all right, we're gonna go fight a different house. We're gonna go fight House Jupiter or whatever. And then the title for the very next chapter would be The Fall of Jupiter. Like, the entire chapter was spoiled in the chapter title. And I found that so frustrating, because I was just like, what's the point of my reading the chapter if I already know how it ends? So I've never come across a book that had that before. I don't know really what to think about this book. It gets a couple of knocks off for violence, some inappropriate jokes, for a little bit of language. Nothing too excessive in any degree, but it is still present. So I'm not going to sit here and recommend this book to a Catholic audience, but if you are interested in reading it, I would say you could work around that. I gave this book 3 stars in the end. It's the first one in a trilogy, and I'm probably not going to go back to that trilogy anytime soon, but it was an interesting experience. I've always found it very interesting to go in and read popular, I guess, secular books, and that was the experience with this one. So I don't regret reading it, but it's probably not the best thing I have read this year, that's for sure.
Next up, I read My True Love Gave to Me, A Catechism for the 12 Days of Christmas by Katie Warner and Elizabeth Zelasco. This is brand new from Tan Publishing. It is a picture book, and I'm just so glad that I was able to get my hands on a copy and read it. I love the idea of this book. It takes all the 12 days of Christmas, right? We all know how the song goes, and decodes it for you. It tells you what each symbol means. For example, a partridge in a pear tree is really Jesus on the cross. And then the 4 calling birds are really the 4 gospels. But the catch with this one is that they rewrote the song so you can still sing it using the original tune, but with the real meaning of the symbols in it. So I don't know, I think that was such a clever idea. And of course, this one is full of such beautiful artwork. I just love it. I think the whole concept was so clever and it was just so well executed. So good job, author and illustrator. I so wish I would have had a book like this with my kids growing up. We would have been all over this one. I think it would make a great gift and a great addition to any Catholic home library. My next book is one that I had requested our local library to buy, and they actually bought it, which never happened, so I was really excited. And it's The Blythes Are Quoted. It is the last book in the Anne of Green Gables series by L.M. Montgomery. I have long wanted to read this book. This is the 2018 edition. It is the entire manuscript as the author presented it to the publisher right before her unexpected death in 1942. Now, down through the years, this has been published in bits and pieces here and there, but this is like the whole shebang as L.M. Montgomery wanted it published. So here we have another book that surprised me. I love the Anne of Green Gables series, but this one was definitely not what I was expecting. It was definitely a little different. The Blythes are in this one, but the story is really not about them. It is a collection of short stories written about people who know the Blythes. They know them, they talk about them, they quote them. And then interspersed with that are poems written by Anne and her son Walter. So you'll have a short story, then you'll have Anne reading a poem and her family comments on it, and then you have another short story. Some of the stories in this book are really funny, but then some of them are also quite dark. That's all I'm going to say. So for that reason, I would not recommend this as a family read aloud, and I don't think that I would really even hand this off to a younger teenager and just say, here you go read it. There is also some sensitive information about the author in this one, so just heads up about that. Now, don't get me wrong, I really did enjoy reading this book, and of course, if you're a die-hard Anne of Green Gables fan, you're going to want to finish out the series and read this book. However, I'm just going to say it's not going to replace Rilla of Ingleside as my very favorite Anne of Green Gables book. My last book is one that I picked up from our church library, and it is this one, Dying to Live by Dr. Ian Murphy, who is a Catholic author and speaker. It's a conversion story. I love a good conversion story, and this one definitely did not disappoint. So this is definitely a very rambly, rollicking, roller coaster type of a tale. The author had a very adventurous time making his way into the Catholic Church. So his story is that he grew up with 2 grandfathers who were Catholic, but no one else in his family was. In fact, they were very anti-Catholic. So the story in some ways is similar to Scott Hahn and his conversion. One by one, different members of his family found their way into the Catholic Church, and eventually the author follows suit. But it wasn't easy for him because by the time he converted, he was a very popular pastor at a Baptist church. So yeah, definitely it was a rough ride. At one point he is very ill and he is in the hospital, and he has members of his congregation coming into him and yelling at him, "What is this about you becoming a Catholic? We can't believe this. You're crazy. You're doomed." You know, just what you want to hear when you're lying in your hospital bed. So even though that sounds really extreme, stuff like that really does happen. Even here on our YouTube channel, Kate and I get our fair share of anti-Catholic hate comments from different people. It's a real thing. So my bottom line with this one is I really did enjoy reading it. Yes, it is a little bit rambly in parts, I will grant you that. But if you like reading conversion stories, which I do, here's another good one. Put it on your list.
All right, so that was our reading for the month of November.
It's always fun when a book comes with a hidden surprise, like a big chart of Thomas Aquinas. Can't go wrong with that.
So as always, let us know in the comments what you read this month and what you're planning to read in December.
So we hope you enjoyed the video. Happy reading. We'll see you next time. Bye.